morning, Wynberg. Founders Day has generally been about reminiscing about the past and remembering those who have gone before us. A special day where we celebrate the generations of women who have walked through these gates and where we acknowledge the incredible evolution that has taken place in the last 134 years. This morning as guest speaker, I could use the next 10 or so minutes to tell you about all the antics I got up to at school, especially under the guise of tech team duties, about the secret hiding places we discovered, or how we figured out how to enter classrooms while the doors were still locked. But no, instead of reminiscing about the past this Founders Day, let's talk about the future. And more importantly, our role and our power in shaping a future, a school, and a country that we are proud to claim as our own. Before we get nice and deep and political though, let me start off by sharing a bit of my story with you. For many of you in this hall, you probably know me as the Maroomba lady with blue hair. What you might not know is that my journey at Wynberg started in 2001, when I entered grade 1 in Mrs. Ball's class next door. For the past 18 years, I've come to know this place as my home. And I don't use this term home loosely. You see, my mother passed away when I was 3 years old, and my little sister was just a 1-year-old baby at the time. We both attended Wynberg from grade 1 to matric. And I was lucky to be exposed to many amazing mothers along the way, who also happened to be teachers and support staff and aftercare monitors. I found a safe place at Wynberg, and I loved my school for it. But here's the thing. I know this term safe place might be contradictory to some of your experiences here. And for that, I'm truly sorry, because I know there has been pain among the students of color who have entered these walls. I know there has been pain among homosexual students, bisexual, trans, non-binary folk, and all those who never identified within the image of what a Wynberg girl should be. I know there has been pain, and I'm not going to ignore that pain today. Because as much as today is about celebrating the good things in our past, it is so important to not be complicit in erasure, particularly the erasure of pain in our narrative. As you get older, you start to realize that some things they taught you at school were not really the full truths, kind of like half-truths. For example, in junior school, grade 7s, you learn about BODMAS, and you think, cool, there's division, multiplication, addition, subtraction, I've got this. Then you reach high school, and suddenly they throw the entire alphabet into your maths equation, and you think, oh my goodness, they've taken this to another level. Wait till you reach university and they tell you about imaginary numbers. For me, this half-truth, if you will, was the concept of the Rainbow Nation. I was born in 1994. We were called the born-free generation, and were constantly reminded of this. We grew up believing in the Rainbow Nation. I mean, there's no black and white in a rainbow, right? Just happy, bright colors. So we were conditioned to believe that everyone was equal from the get-go, and that the hard work of eradicating apartheid was over. I remember standing in the kitchen with my dad on multiple occasions, arguing that I don't see race. There's no such thing as race. Skin color was just a biological pigmentation of our skin. Now, obviously, this sparked some lengthy debates because both my mom and dad were part of the Black consciousness movement during the struggle, which was started by Steve Biko, who we remember this week for being brutally killed 41 years ago by the apartheid government. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, Kiara, in 1994, the law stated everyone was equal. We all had equal rights, equal opportunities. But a word, equality, was spoken about so loudly when we were growing up. But a word that was missing from this equation was equity. You see, before we can talk about equality, we must first talk about equity. And I'm going to attempt to explain this concept to you using the analogy of a racetrack. Imagine Caster Semenya is about to run the 400-meter final. If we talk about equality, here is the starting line. All of the runners stand equally behind the starting line for the start of the race. This seems equal, right? Now, if you've ever watched a 400-meter race taking place, you'll notice that on the athletics track, The runners do not start in a straight line. They start in staggered positions. You see, the inner circle of the athletics track is 400 meters in distance. But as you move outward and outer, those lanes start covering more and more different distance. In fact, if there are 8 lanes on an athletics track, lane number 8 covers a distance of 453 meters. So, if the athletes are running a 400-meter race, the starting positions of the runners need to be staggered to make sure that they each run a fair race and cover 400 meters each. The runner in lane number 8, the furthest from the circle, will start over here. The runner in lane number 7 will start slightly behind, lane number 6 slightly behind, all the way until you get to lane number 1, the innermost lane, where that runner starts the furthest behind on the track. If they all start at these positions, they will cover 400 meters during the race in order to reach the finish line. And we can all agree that this makes it a fair race. This is the idea of equity. The fact that they have compensated for the extra distance on the track by making each runner start at different points. The lesson to take away from this is that life is not a race. That's not the lesson here. But rather, that we must first practice equity before and in order to achieve equality. I think our country skipped a very important step in our journey towards freedom. Post-1994, they made us all start at the same starting line and called it equality. How did we go from being one of the most oppressive, racist countries in the world to suddenly teach our kids not to see race? This concept of the Rainbow Nation, where everyone was equal and color didn't matter, was one of the hardest things I've had to unlearn from school. Unlearning is a radical idea that forces you to question the things you have always taken for granted. And if you don't agree with certain things anymore, you begin a process of unlearning them and finding your own truth. A turning point came for me in grade 11 when I attended a one-week leadership forum in Joburg called Enke, Make Your Mark. And it quite literally changed my life. The 3 core aims of this program was to connect, equip, and inspire young high school students. First, they connected us with fellow grade 11s from around the country who came from totally different socioeconomic backgrounds, majority of whom came from far less privileged schools than ours. I was in a space that was unfamiliar and slightly uncomfortable. A space that made me question a lot of things I once took for granted. Secondly, they equipped us with valuable skills and the confidence to go back to our communities and implement our own community action projects. Lastly, they inspired us to unlock the power within ourselves to believe we can make a real change. And let me tell you, at the end of 1 week, there were 108 grade 11 students going back to our different corners of the country, believing we were going to change the world. And we did. In my year alone, someone started the first library at their school. Someone started a tutoring program. Someone started a vegetable garden that would feed their community for years to come. The main thing was that we each had to find an issue in our community that we felt passionately about. Whether it was access to healthcare, bullying, environmental awareness, feminism, we all had to choose one thing in our communities that really got us angry and passionate about changing. For me and many others, this was education, and more specifically, the huge inequality that exists within our education system. It was no longer okay for me to just be aware that the majority of schools in our country are far worse off than ours. Suddenly, there was a sense of responsibility to take action. I asked myself, how do I use my privilege as a tool, not a weapon, to benefit others and bridge the gap of inequality by doing something meaningful, something that is not just for my own benefit or success anymore? How do I even begin this mammoth task of changing the world? The answer is simple. Start small. Humble beginnings. My community action project was called Maroomba Jam. And it took 9 months of planning and writing letters to Mrs. Harding and the governing body, but eventually in 2012 we held the first Maroomba Jam holiday workshop with a group of learners from the Zamasa Secondary School in Langa. They came for an entire week to our ballet hall, and my friends and I ran a really successful workshop with this group. We then held a fundraiser concert in this hall where they got the chance to perform on the stage alongside many other acts from Wynberg who supported this concert. This was the very first Maroomba Jam concert. And why am I telling you all of this? Because we all have to start somewhere. 6 years later, Maroomba Jam is now a registered PTY limited company. We employ 20 part-time employees, teach over 350 school learners on a weekly basis, have outreach programs in 7 different schools, and we continue to grow with each passing year. It's crazy to think that what started off as a project with 10 girls from Langa in our ballet hall went on to break the Guinness World Record this year for the largest marimba ensemble in the world, using only female marimba players. I was watching a concert at Grand West last year with a friend, and at one point I looked over to him and said, "One day we'll have the Maroomba Jam Festival on a stage this big." Shortly after that, I met with the managers of Grand West, who have not only offered to make Grand West the home of the Maroomba Jam Festival for the next 3 years, but they're giving us this venue for free to raise funds for our outreach program. And the lesson here is to believe in yourself. And when your dreams start becoming a reality, dream bigger. And talking about dreaming big, when I watch the Olympic Games or the Commonwealth Games, I feel this immense sense of pride when the South African women's hockey team enters the pitch. 3 of those women went to Wynberg: Ilse Davids, Candice Manuel, and Quinita Bobs. They are all women of color. Quinita and Candice were actually in my house, Sylvan, while I was at school, and seeing them go from winning inter-house hockey tournaments on our field to competing on the biggest stage in the world is an amazing feeling of connection and community. We are a community, and we have so much potential. What if we created a culture of community rather than competition? Today, you are sitting next to your greatest support system. Do not underestimate the value of friendships and relationships formed here at school. Success stories are never as easy as they sound. The world is a tough place to navigate, but we can make it a little bit easier for one another by supporting each other and believing in each other's dreams. My best friends who helped me at that very first Maroomba Jam concert have helped and supported me at every single Maroomba Jam festival since we left high school. And one of those friends is actually here today. Rain Callahan was head girl in my matric year, and she became the 3rd person of color ever to have her name printed on that board of head girls. It took 114 years for Nosipiwo Balfour, commonly known as Sue, to be the first black head girl in 1998. But it took another decade for Ray to add more color to that board. And what a profound moment it was in the history of our school when it happened. I truly believe there are a great deal more profound moments that are going to happen at Wynberg. And I know it is not going to take another 100 years for that to happen. You are exposed to so much more information, and for lack of a better word, you are so much more woke than when I was at school. I only started using terms such as patriarchy, cultural appropriation, intersectionality when I got to university. But having conversations with some of my students made me realize that we are living in a very interesting time. Issues such as gender and mental health are being spoken about a lot more openly. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, but there's a definite sense of moving forward. You are brave, you are bold, you are powerful, and you are aware of what is happening around you. We are unlearning at a faster pace than ever before because the information is at the swipe of a screen. If we, as educators, are not actively going through a process of unlearning on a daily basis, we start to become a liability in an institution of learning. It's important to remember that as you go through life, your opinions are probably going to change or develop into new worldviews. It's important to practice a culture of accepting that people can change, and we shouldn't hold our community too harshly to their past if they are willing to change and learn. We create hostility among ourselves if we are driven by the desire to keep defending ourselves. Sometimes we need to put our pride and our ego in the backseat in order for the car to move forward. How do we get to a point where every learner that enters these doors is proud to claim the space as their own? Because it is. Well, it takes leadership and vision. NK's official definition of leadership is that a leader is someone who goes out and creates positive change in the world. Antoine de Saint says, if you want to build a ship, don't herd people together to collect wood and don't assign them to tasks and work. Rather teach them to long for the immensity of the sea. I would like to end off by considering our motto, honor before honors. When I was in junior school, these 3 words used to confuse me. I had a vague idea of what it meant, but I couldn't really explain it to people who asked. Now, when thinking about our motto, I can sum it up in 1 word: service. Leadership is often more about serving than leading. For those of you that don't see yourselves as leaders, who wish to be leaders but see overwhelming challenges in front of you, know that you are a force of nature. There is no real obstacle to people who seek to become leaders if leadership is approached with proper integrity. Anyone can be a leader. If you are driven to a particular cause or aim, find your cause. Don't wait to be told from the people up here about transformation. Be the transformation. Because you are not the leaders of tomorrow, you are the leaders of today. I'd like to end with a quote that sums up everything. There are decades where nothing happens. And there are weeks where decades happen. A luta continua, may the struggle continue.